Chain smoke your problems away. Smoke Pit Fairy Tales, Part 4, Chapter 38. Hell Awaits. Only 13 of them were left. Few were in any condition to fight. All in the circle of death as they drove through the night. Chuck was at the wheel, swerving through the parked cars, bodies, and rubble in the street. Christchurch, McKenzie, Thatch, and Akon tended to the wounded. Thatch took off his gloves and stuffed them in Stockton's mouth.
This is gonna hurt.
He rubbed antiseptic ointment into the skin inside of his hands and pulled the charred mess off of Stockton's arm. She screamed into the gloves. The top layers of blackened skin slid off of her like the burnt crust from an overdone campfire marshmallow. The smell of burning flesh was abhorrent. Thatch poured liquid new skin over her arm and massaged it in. Stockton started to weep from the pain. Thatch took the gauze from her medkit and wrapped it around her seared flesh.
You'll be all right.
She cradled her arm and moaned as the truck bumped and bounced. Russian machine guns and rockets fired from the left of them. Chuck swerved and another volley flew from the right. The truck tilted and Chuck punched the accelerator. Another rocket shook the vehicle and it spun, then tumbled over off the road and crashed into the trees of the forest on the far side of the research center. Thatch's head pounded. He rubbed his crown and saw he had blood pumping from a laceration on his scalp. He wanted to lay back and die, but he'd already failed his Marines enough that day. He kicked the back door of the truck open and scoped out the situation. They were at the bottom of a hill, deep in the tree line. The colony's river was only a few meters away. The Russians that were shooting at them must have been on the other side. Thatch turned back and pulled Capulet out of the vehicle as he moaned, then Stockton and Lighthouse. Akon pulled herself out of the cab, dragging Chuck behind her. Then she and Thatch got the rest of the Marines out. They were all in terrible condition. None could stand up straight or walk without teetering. Hans took a few steps towards the water and fell flat on his face.
We need to keep moving.
Akon moaned. Vickers was missing half of the skin from her face. Blood poured down the front of her suit. She clawed her way to the river, submerged her head, and yanked it back, releasing an almost orgasmic groan. She smiled as the cold water flowed into her mouth. Without letting her shoulders off the deck, she ran water through her hair and half laughed and half wept. McKenzie panted on the ground with his head propped up on the side of the truck. His vision was blurred and he smelled copper. He tried to focus on the trees just up the incline, but couldn't get the two images to come together. He closed one of his eyes to get a reference, then the other. He switched back and forth until his eyes began at least focusing on the same area. He squinted and saw a figure lurching toward him. It wasn't much more than a shadow creeping under the leaves. He leaned his face forward in an effort to better see who or what was in front of him. As his vision cleared, he saw that the shadow wasn't alone. There were at least 5 of them, slowly making their way towards the crashed truck. McKenzie tried to yell that someone was there, but his voice wouldn't cooperate. He reached for his rifle, but it wasn't there. He panicked, wondering where it went, but he did find his pistol in its holster. The shadows crept up to just a few yards away. The first one stepped into a sliver of light shining through the trees from the burning hospital in the distance. Its face was ugly. Sharp wood and mushrooms covered with hairy, white mold covered its grimace. McKenzie let out a howl of gibberish and shot into the shadows. The pistol's report demanded the attention of the other Marines. The ones who were cognizant enough to aim a weapon fired at the creatures lurking towards them. The beasts went down, but quickly regrew what they were missing, and again came forward. Dorchester was prone on the grass a few yards forward of McKenzie. His breath was knocked out, and his brain wasn't functioning enough to tell what was happening. He looked up past the side of his face, and one of the beasts grabbed him by the neck. The freak opened his mouth and vomited mold into Dorchester's face. Dorchester tried to scream and clawed at the demon. It, in return, used its splintered wooden claws to rip off Dorchester's fingers. McKenzie, Thatch, and Akon fired at the monsters around them, trying to keep them down. Capulet sprinted to Dorchester, only to get thrown back into the truck by the thing holding him. A long, mushroom-covered tongue whipped out of the thing's mouth and slid down into his victim's throat. Dorchester convulsed as his body was taken hostage. Capulet's back ached, and his muscles spasmed as he pulled himself up off the truck. He got Dorchester back in his sights and put a bullet in his head, trying to spare him from feeling whatever would happen next. He took his last incendiary grenade, screamed,
"I'm throwing flame!"
pulled the pin, and hurled it at the monsters. The demons screamed as the fire engulfed their bodies. The Marines watched and listened to the deplorable sight in front of them. Thatch was by the water and grabbed Vickers. Chuck pulled McKenzie over his shoulder, and the Marines hobbled their way deeper into the woods. The forest was dark. the Marines could hear the howls of the beasts and the crunching of leaves and sticks under their feet over the sound of guns in the distance. Akan had resumed mumbling her swears to herself as she limped alongside the river.
Damn it! Damn it!
She hadn't enough strength left to hold her rifle up. The sling kept it above her waist, and her hands just barely held it in place. Thatch's knees felt like there were nails under their caps. He was disoriented and only managed to hold on to Vickers by wrapping his right arm under her shoulder and dragging her along. Vickers was so far gone mentally that she felt elated. The blood loss was dragging her into a peaceful sleep. She felt that she'd be the happiest person in the world if whoever was dragging her would just tuck her in for the night. Chuck droned forward, with his face pointed towards the sky. When he looked down, he felt lightning shoot up his spine. He stumbled, step by step, wincing with every drop of his foot. He was positive some of his toes were broken. Something wasn't quite right with his neck. And he was missing his right fang. He tongued where the sharp tooth used to be, wondering when he was going to just die. Capulet had resorted to pulling McKenzie by the handle on his pack, dragging him along the ground. He had trouble keeping his eyes open. He felt like a children's toy that had lost one of its batteries. McKenzie, being dragged behind, took in and held deep breaths, trying to focus on something besides the shattered glass that had replaced his leg bones. Christchurch had Stockton's good arm pulled over his shoulders, tugging her along. Stockton held her shaking arm up to her chest. The ointment had taken away the sting, but the dull, throbbing soreness still plagued her. Her bottom lip quivered, and she sucked in short, sharp breaths as the tears still flooded over her cheeks. They climbed up the hill towards the inner side of Volgograd and hugged the colony wall, some using it as support to make it back towards friendly lines. They made it past the forest and stayed in the trees passing the housing area. The Russians and Americans were still fighting tooth and nail in the market and park. Smaller mechs moved like tanks through the streets, providing fire support for their respective infantry. The line was spread evenly across the colony's diameter. The Marines stopped and hid in some bushes when they spotted Russians to their front. The enemy, though, wasn't looking their way. They were fighting the Americans on the other end. Wordlessly, Akan and Thatch looked at each other and decided it wasn't worth trying to push through. Thatch fingered the colony's wall until he found a hatch that would let them through. He pulled it open and ushered in the Marines. The crawl space was tight. There wasn't much more space available than for a high crawl. McKenzie managed his way through, using his arms to pull himself along. Stockton and Hans moved with their wounded arms up by their belly and maneuvered with their other 3 limbs. Vickers had to be dragged. Her mind had slipped, and she started happily singing nonsense lyrics to herself.
The evil wizard's been cut up and spread across the land. The good one doesn't know exactly what he's holding in his hand.
Akan led the file. Thatch held the rear. Akan shuffled forward over the steel grates with a pistol in her hand, stopping to look down the intersections when they came about. She didn't know how far to go, nor how far they'd gone. She thought that she was past the Russian line, but had no clue how large no man's land was, and didn't want to get caught taking fire from both ends.
Hey, hold up.
McKenzie said.
What is it?
Akan called back. McKenzie looked at a diagram on one of the surface panels.
There's a map here. I'm trying to figure out where we're at.
McKenzie examined the lines and shapes printed on the metal.
The good and the bad used to be the best of friends. But tragedy and sorrow has put that to an end.
Vickers softly sang in front of McKenzie. She bobbed her head from side to side, smiling hysterically.
The young boy put the chopped up wizard back all into one piece, but didn't know the evil that he had just released.
McKenzie found the "You Are Here" dot and ran his fingers over the map.
It looks like we may be able to take these crawlways to the central hangar.
Which way?
We're gonna have to go 400 meters forward, then hook a left. The passageway out there should be a little larger than this one.
The Marines started moving again, and Vickers kept singing.
The wizard recognized, loved blonde smart friend. But she was a reincarnation when it was all said and end.
Only Christchurch, who was dragging her, and McKenzie could make out what Vickers was blabbering about. Akan's hand slipped on something and she stumbled from her crawl. She stopped and flashed her light towards the spot she slid. It was a spot of the furry mold, with a single crushed mushroom where her hand had been.
Fuck!
What's up?
The evil one summoned a god. He crawled right up inside, destroying all the villagers. Underwater, they all died.
There's more of that mold up here.
Fucking great.
How much oxygen does everybody have left?
The Marines checked their systems. No one had more than an hour's worth.
Put your helmets back on. We don't know how this shit spreads, but if it's airborne, we can at least cut that option out.
The Marines did as they were told. Christchurch had to put Vickers' helmet on for her. She ignored the pain of the face mask on her torn up skin and kept singing.
The good wizard tried to figure out how it all went wrong. He looked up all the ancient texts and all the ancient songs.
A couple dozen meters ahead, at an intersection, there was a ladder. The Marines had to straddle the downward tube to get across. The first few got over without a problem. When Christchurch got there, she had to turn around to grab Vickers. Since McKenzie's legs were useless, he traded places with Beyle, who was behind him, to help push across Vickers. Beyle stepped down into the tube and secured himself to the ladder. The entirety of the vertical pathway was lined with the stocky fungus. He grabbed Vickers' shoulders and eased her across to where Christchurch could grab her. With Vickers across, Beyle started to climb up. He couldn't move his foot on the last step. He rolled his eyes and tried to unhook his boot from the step. After a couple of shakes, the step shook back. Beyle jerked his head down to investigate. A Russian soldier, infected with the fungus, had clung to his leg. Beyle shook the foot harder, then jerked up and tried to kick it in the face.
One of these fucking things has my leg!
McKenzie slipped himself forward and pointed his pistol down the shaft. The monster started to climb up Beyle's back.
Fuck! Fuck! Get this thing off of me!
Beyle cried. He couldn't do it himself. If he let go of the ladder, he'd fall down into the darkness.
The evil wizard led the orcs and went on a rampage. The good wizard had to find a way to put him in a lasting cage.
McKenzie got a clear shot and put a bullet through the freak's head. But the thing didn't stop. Almost as soon as the bullet left the skull, mushrooms and mold grew back in its place. The demon screeched at them and then planted its jagged wooden teeth into Beyle's thigh. Beyle screamed and tried to shake it off. The monster dug its claws into Beyle's ribs, forcing him to cough up blood. Beyle locked his arms around the ladder. McKenzie kept shooting the beast with little or no effect. He dropped the magazine out of his pistol and went to reload.
Fought until they were chained up atop the peak. The evil wizard was secured. There was nowhere to sneak.
Keeping one arm on the ladder, Beyle reached for his belt and pulled out a grenade. He looked at it for a moment, then hacked up more blood. He pulled the pin, then let himself fall into the darkness down the tube with the thing still digging into him. There was a loud pop from down the tube. Then, only silence and darkness. McKenzie stared down into the abyss. Something fell past his head, down into the dark. He looked up to see another monster crawling, face first, down the upper ladder.
Shit!
McKenzie flipped to his back and fired a few rounds into it. Moldy ooze fell from its wounds and splattered over Mackenzie's mask, blinding him. He felt the thing crawl over top of him. He dropped his gun and grabbed it by whatever he was holding and tried to push it down the tube. Chuck was behind McKenzie. He crawled over Mackenzie's legs, accidentally stepping on them, shooting excruciating pain through Mackenzie's body, forcing him to scream. Chuck grabbed the monster's feet and pushed it forward over the ledge. Panting, he used his form to wipe the gunk from Mackenzie's helmet and face mask.
You alright? No, I'm fucking not!
Mackenzie cried. The pain in his legs was unbearable. He whimpered and wept. Chuck looked over at Christchurch.
You ready for him?
Christchurch nodded.
Okay, buddy. We'll be out of here soon.
Chuck straddled the tube, grabbed Mackenzie's shoulder straps, and pulled him over. Mackenzie let out a yell when his legs hit the far deck. Chuck latched Mackenzie to his back and pulled him through the tunnels, dragging Mackenzie's feet behind. After a few minutes, Mackenzie stopped yelping and passed out from the pain. Akan led the column to where she thought they should turn, towards the center. She couldn't know for sure, but it seemed to go towards the center far enough, and no one besides Mackenzie read Russian well enough to be able to read the map accurately. The inward tunnel was just tall enough to walk, but still so thin that it had to be single file. They walked the line straight through, except Vickers and Mackenzie. Christchurch and Chuck had to walk backwards to drag them through. When they finally reached the end of the service tunnel, Akan put her shoulder to the hatch and eased it open with a pistol forward. She peered into a room that was about 50 feet wide. Computer consoles, pipes, wires, and blood covered the room. A decent helping of dead Russians littered the floor. The Marines quickly cleared the room and posted up to reassess their situation. Their bodies were all still battered, broken, and sore. Thatch ordered that everyone take off their helmets before they suffocated. No one had much oxygen left. Chuck put Mackenzie down and tossed his helmet to the side.
What do you think happened here?
Thatch looked around.
No clue.
There was a porthole in the floor in the center of the room. Thatch saw the ship they rode in on through the glass. Landing craft, mechs, and sailors and Marines surrounded it.
But we're almost home, boys.
He motioned his head.
Come on, look.
The Marines who could went to go see. Chuck tried to look down, but the pain in his neck shocked him, forcing him to roll back his head. He rubbed the muscle at the base of his skull to try to massage it out. Akan pulled up her radio.
Any station, India 3-1.
The radio hissed, and a voice responded.
India 3-1. Viking COC, send your traffic.
The Marine smiled and sighed in relief.
Viking. COC, we've been separated from our unit. We're currently in a room above the central hangar. We have casualties and we have a sample of the bioweapon.
India 1, say again your last?
Akan spoke into the radio with so much joy that she was close to being done that she almost started to weep.
We have the Wiedemann and we need help getting casualties off deck.
Roger. Broadcast coordinates to frequency 370 Delta.
The Marines jubilantly watched Akan as she turned to her secondary HUD on her arm and punched in the numbers. Capulet couldn't wait for a beer. Chuck couldn't stop thinking about a peaceful cigarette. Stockton dreamed of a long, hot shower and the skin graft that would come soon that would take the pain away from her mangled arm. That's thought about taking his car for a long drive through the desert and just be alone with himself. McKenzie slept, passed out on the floor, and Vickers sang nonsense to herself. Royal held his gut. The wound was sore, but he had managed to get through the ordeal. He fantasized about being in a nice, cozy hospital bed, being waited on by nurses in those sexy white dresses. Sure, it probably wouldn't play out like a porno, but he could dream. He looked at Lighthouse and smiled, knowing that they'd be gone soon. Then, a splatter of red liquid painted Lighthouse's face. Royal looked down to the new pain in his chest. A jagged, wooden claw had ripped through his ribcage. None of them noticed the mold on the back of Mackenzie's helmet crawl off and spread to the dead Russians on the floor, bringing their dead carcasses back to life. Lighthouse screamed and pulled his weapon up. Before he could get a shot off, a different monster ripped his body in half. There were 15 twisted fiends, hunched over, surrounding the few Marines left. Thatch unslung his weapon, and wielding it like a bat, struck the freaks. It didn't keep them down long, but neither did shooting them. He swung again and again at them in a violent rage, tearing them to pieces. Capulet and Chuck followed suit. As they struck them, moldy mist plumed into the air. Their broken and ripped body parts quickly regenerated with their wood-like stalks and moldy spores. The other Marines did what their bodies would let them.
We can't let this shit get down to the landing area!
Chuck screamed as he beat one down.
Yeah, no shit.
Capulet screamed back. Thatch kicked one in the chest and sent it back about 10 feet. He noticed that it didn't seem like it weighed that much. He looked over its body quickly. There wasn't much left of the man the thing used to be. He found one that was less damaged and pushed it. It still weighed as much as it should.
Dump your ammo into these things!
The Marines all fired wildly at the ghouls attacking them. After a fefew seconds, they all lay down on the ground, twitching while they regrew into more monstrous figures.
Why did we do that?
They're lighter when there's less human left of them. So they'll be easier to hold back.
That sprinted to the first freak that stood up and kicked it. The thing flew back several meters.
At this point, it's just a sack of mold.
How does this help us?
Stockton demanded.
Come here.
The Marines circled around the monsters. As they stood up, the Marines simply kicked them back to the wall. Some took a little more effort, but if they caught them before they regenerated, it wasn't much harder than booting fungus off a log.
Hold them there.
Thatch went to the computer consoles near the other end of the room. He dug through a cabinet until he found a filing cabinet full of documents and a bottle of vodka.
Someone help me out with this.
Chuck ran back, and the two of them took the documents and tossed them over the freaks, struggling to get up until there was more paper in the pile than demons.
Get your lighter.
Thatch told Akan as he poured the vodka over the lump. Akan unzipped her suit, grabbed the lighter from her breasts, and set a wad of paper on fire. She tossed it into the pile, and the entire mound, vodka, paper, and monsters, set ablaze. The Marines stepped backward and watched as the demons burned their way to hell. Thatch looked around.
Anything with that fungus on it gets thrown in.
The Marines took off gloves, helmets, and whatever other parts of their suits that were contaminated and tossed them in the fire. As the last embers fizzled out, the far door slammed open, and a fresh squad of Marines flooded into the room.
Hey everybody, what's up? Thanks for listening to another chapter set of Chain Smoke Your Problems Away. I think this is the second to last chapter, right? We got one more next week?
One more next week.
One more next week. And then we are wrapped up. And that's exciting news. Yep, this chapter, and then we got one more on the 30th. And then, as per tradition, once that's over, we're going to spend the next week and a half or 2 weeks. There's a lot of people in this one. Talking to the voice actors that were, in this book. So those will be live streams and they'll be here on YouTube. So be sure to tune into those. We'll go over the time stuff at the end of the next video chapter. But then we should be starting Smoke with Fairy Tales 5 on May 14th. Anyway, I would like to thank all of you for tuning in. I would like to thank my YouTube members who get these chapters as soon as I upload them. I would like to thank my Patreon followers who get these chapters as soon as I am done editing them, and we're a couple chapters in the book 6 over there right now. And then I'd like to thank everybody who's gotten the War Chest, which is the box set of these books. They come with stickers and cards and a custom painted 50 cal ammo can. You know the deal. But I don't remember if we talked about this last week or not, but I got the new patches, and I did talk about this last week. Anyway, I think they look slick. All right, everybody, here are your bloopers. You have a good day, and I'll see you next time. Ciao.
Okay, we're just gonna do it. We're gonna do a little sound check. We're just gonna check the sound. We're gonna check the sound. We're gonna check the sound. We're gonna check the sound.
Chapter 38 is named after one of the best Slayer albums. Hellowoods. I'm throwing flame!
Let's fucking kick this pig. Fucking hell's waiting. God damn.
Why did we do that? Why did we do that?
Pig kickers!
India 3-1. Viking CLC. Send your traffic.
Small Pit Fairy Tales Part 4. Chain smoke your problems away. Cigarette, 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 cigarette.
Why did we do that?
You don't have to put this in the bloopers. You don't have to put this anywhere. Nobody ever has to hear this, but you and me.
Capulet throws grenades and Marines lurch into the woods. Vickers is suffering from extreme blood loss and is loopy. Marines make it to the colony wall and head to a housing area. They find a hatch and head back to the vents. Why can I read those 4 fucking lines, but not the lines that I have correctly when it's 3 or more lines? Someone explain this to me. Am I dumb? Well, according to Capulet's next line, yeah, no shit.
Hell awaits. Do you ever just try getting the Doomslayer to take on the mushroom zombies? Did you try getting the popular 2000s nu metal band who wore masks that everyone knows who I'm talking about just from that description? Mushroom Head to take on the mushrooms.
India 3-1. Say again your last.
We'll get back into that fucking groove I had going on in the last chapter. Don't you worry. Don't you worry your pretty little head, Trip.
Why did we do that?
He kicked the back door of the truck open and scooped out the situation. Scoped!
Hey man, thanks for taking a whack at this. I love your work, dude. I love your work too, dude. Fucking bro hug fest.
Yeah, you're beautiful.
Why did we do that?
Her medkit, Stockton's medkit, the Mecton for Stockton.
Roger.
McKenzie let out a howl of gibberish and shot gibberith. Just like my reading right now.
India 3-1, Viking CLC. Send your traffic.
Ah, fuck. So bad. I don't like it.
Why did we do that?
I made out with him to death. That's worse than herpes! Ah!
Say again your last.
I don't know. Fuck.
Roger.
The entirety of the vertical pathway was lined with the stalky fungus. Stalky.
Say again your last.
People are fucking narratively illiterate.
All right. This is Matt Kupcikevicious, voicing Beyle for Smoke Pit Fairy Tales Book 4. One of these fucking things has my leg!
Yeah, 'tis the season for a hurricane. Cha-la-la-la-la-la. Fuck up the southern coast and all their houses.
Fuck! Get this thing off of me!
Give me a hug!
Ah!
None of these guys are gonna get what they want. Nothing's gonna go right. It's so fucking obvious it hurts shit. Why can't people tell when they're in a book?
Ah!
Is that a Woody stalk or are you just happy to see me?
Ah!